Good night, good evening, fellow listener. I am the stoned storyteller. Sorry, it's pretty late for me in Italy. So anyway, I have my tea, I have my book, and I am fucking ready to end our book, Artifact of Evil. We are at the last part finally. Last time we read chapter 28 to 30. Now it's 31 to 33 plus the epilogue. So it's time to end this book, right? Let's see how it is end. Let's begin. Chapter 31. It took several days for Gord to manage to walk back to where his friends waited. The wounds from spell and hammer were worse than he had thought. Changing into his feline form seemed to help. It also avoided the carnivores drawn to the scene of the battle by the smell of blood and death. By the time Gord came to the camp where Gellor, Shirt, and the boys waited, he was nearly at full strength again, and feeling fit. His comrades cheered him when Gord walked in, but the expression his worn face bore quickly dampened their joy. "The news is bad, then?" Gellor asked. "I fear the worst," said Gord morsely. "Omni escaped despite all I could do. The vile dwarf is perhaps in the hands of Archmage Mordenkainen, for that one brought a horde of the enemy to battle and routed the humanoids, so Melf said. That one was there, too. I saw him and owe him much." Yes, I know it's pretty dark, this webcam, sorry. I have to. It liked me like this. Good. Uh, they talked long then, Gord telling of his pursuit of Obmi, his feigned service to the demon Grast, and the desperate attempt to prevent the dwarf from fleeing to use with the second key. They marveled at his laying kick. At the very moment the crescent mage had turned the young man into a stone statue by his magic, and agreed that Malf had done a great service in restoring Gord to natural life. "You may have done worse," Shart said, slapping his friend on the back and hugging him warmly. "To have read the word of the likes of Kick is a service to all." Hmm. Wait a second, I have some issues. I don't think you hear me. Okay, good. I'm not sure. Okay, good. I have some issues with my microphone. Hmm. I have to eat it, and I don't know. After a bit more discussion, they shared a meager supper and retired. There was much to do now. It was time to get from the forest as swiftly as possible, and get word to those who waited as to what events had taken place. Perhaps it was already known, but the probability of the passage into the hands of the Cambion of that instrument of evil was of utmost urgency to relate. They slept uneasily and rose before dawn. It was a relatively swift and easy journey. There were none of the evil creatures lurking in the pathway, although they encountered a cautious group of armed woodsmen and later a small band of wild elves roaming through the trees seeking any enemies who might still be hiding there. Both companies were suspicious of the five at first, but then gave them much honor and respect for their part in what had occurred. God made a point of telling both the chief of the wood dwellers and the elfin leader that the dwarf Obmi had borne an object of evil power toward the realm of Uz. That news, he knew, will soon spread throughout the forest. Thus they made their way toward the south, and soon they were near to Tasham again. That evening the two lads averred that they had no desire to ever dwell in that village again, but were anxious to remain with their three newfound friends. "We will be most useful when we shed," Thatch had assured the doubtful Gellor. "In return for taking us along and teaching us about weapon, and the rest will cook and clean up and care for your gear most thoroughly." "That we will," chimed in the little shadow, "and we'll never get in the way either." How will you keep up once we are out of the forest? Asked Shart. That put the damper on both boys' plans, but only for a moment. I think we can manage, said Shad earnestly to his bigger comrade, if they'll allow us to put our gear on their horses. Right? Tetch said, understanding his friend's direction. We can trot all day as long as we don't have to tote all that stuff too. Shart looked, for he had no intention of making these two lads run behind their horses. The barbarian had already decided that both boys would make sound warriors and hunters with proper training and guidance, and they will see they got it. When they arrived at Tasham tomorrow, Shart had the plans to find a pair of small horses for them to ride, and to see them properly accoutred in the process. They will earn their gear and keep through service. The Bard had no such intentions, for his duty was to return to his homeland and report there to his liege lord. Unwilling to deflate their hopes and unaware of Shart's resolve, Gallor merely grunted non-committally and let the whole thing pass. Master Gord, what do you say? Shad begged. Having no desire to teach these boys the dark ways of thieving and swindling in the crowded city, Gord shrugged the pleading query off. We can say what will come to pass, lads. I am no lover of battles, nor am I much skilled at the hunt. Let us see what we shall see. The brawny hillman was disappointed at his comrade's response to the entreaties of the two. Come now, he admonished Gore. This is not the way to repay the loyalty of these lads. Of course you can remain with us, boys, he said to the two. Happy and satisfied, the pair rolled up for sleep, and the men soon took their example. If they were to make Tasham on the morrow, they would have to start early and keep up a good pace. They had gone far the next morning when the horses began to behave abnormally. The animals began snorting and rolling their eyes nervously, and it was difficult to keep them from bolting. This alerted, the three men loosened their weapons and sought signs of some beast or enemy that might be near, but there were none to be seen. This is odd, Geller said. I had sworn that the animals chanted something, but there is no sound nor trace of any predator or lurking humanoid. They certainly act as if they smell something most dire, Shart said. My nose is keen enough, but I scent nothing. God, if you use that cat's nose of yours. Not this time, the young thief said to his latter regret. I'll not be taking a different shape before an audience of gaping churls. Galler almost used his own power to take animal form himself, so as to see what made the steeds so uneasy. But there was no time, for even as he contemplated it, all three horses bolted. Tetch and Shadow were riding while Gordon and Shirt walked. They had just switched, and the animals seemed to have calmed somewhat. Then, without any warning, they took to galloping. The bard had no choice but to try to regain control of his horse, then catch those of the lads and rein them in as well. In seconds he was out of sight, and the two young adventurers were left standing in startled uncertainty. This, in turn, was shattered by a horrible sound that came rushing toward them from the woods nearby. Boar! Shart roared in warning, lowering his spear as he said it. There was a crashing, and a bristling form rushed toward them. The thing was larger than a wizened and had tusk as long as a man's forearm. Its rush bowled over a sapling, and the earth shook under the impact of its huge, cloven hooves. Oh, how many pages? God had time to think that a boar larger than an auroch was impossible, and then it was upon them. Shart's aim was true, but the point of his spear barely scraped the creature's chest. There was a loud report as the spear shaft splintered, and then the animal was past. The barbarian had been knocked backward by the onslaught, and he lay stunned and bleeding against the base of a tree. As the monstrous boar rushed upon him, Garda sprung aside, jabbing it automatically with the spear he had gained from the enemy. The metal of the weapon was enchanted, but it only tore a shallow gash along the creature's flank as it went past. That was sufficient to make it bellow in rage. The huge swine weighed a ton and more, Gord guessed, yet he stopped its mad charge and turned more quickly than the young thief would have imagined possible. Then it paused for a second, its little eyes glowing with both rage and a cunning that was more disturbing than its fearful tusks and impossible bulk. Gord shuddered but kept the magical spear aimed squarely at the monster's head. Come on, pig! I have stale for you to eat! The boar shook its barrel-sized head, sending a spray of foam flying. The huge mouth opened, and the thing spoke. That twig you wave so bravely will serve only to pin your own ass, manling. It snarled, and with that it came again. The thing went from stillness to full charge in a step, and it was all God could manage to leap out of its path and avoid the razor-edged tusks with which it meant to cut him in pieces. It was unarmed, but there had been no chance to so much as to take a poke at the monster with a spear. The boar thing had halted its rush again and stood with its terrible little eyes locked on Gord. It is good to have a test, it said in its thick, grunting voice. I had thought never to find one of you as agile as a monkey. And a loud, slobbering, squealing low that made Gord's blood run cold. Sensing an advantage, the devil boar rushed again at that very moment. Sorry. Its charge caught Gord this time, one tusk leaving a bloody trail across his chest and arm as it went past. It whirled and tried again, but this time Gord was too quick, and the monstrous thing thundered past harmlessly. There was no chance to strike it, but now Gord was beginning to time the thing's rushes. The gigantic boar watched him again, running its prehensile tongue over its one bloody tusk while it did so. Yes, it is said as much to itself as to God. I will drink all of your blood, little man, before I devour your flesh. There was more promise in that tone than threat. That tongue belonged to no pig. What are you, boar thing? It is clear no swine, were type or otherwise. You never tell it, but know that I am what humans call a Rakshasa. Rakshasa? It isn't a tiger man? Why a boar man? I don't know. Not one of the weaklings which are so known to your ilk, but a true one of my kind. I am come from the hells to feast and bring woe to all here on this plain you call earth. It rumbled in its hideous voice. God spat at it, striking it full in one of its mean fiery eyes. I am happy to know that, pighead, for I have never killed one of your sort before. He spoke with confidence he did not fail, and hoped that nothing betrayed the fear that was inside him. The spittle and the taunting brought the monster rushing again, and this time Gord not only avoided its attack, but stuck the spear well into its rear arm as it went past. This caused the devil pig to emit another ear-hammering squeal. Now it gnashed its jaws hideously, and slavered and foamed as it did so, eyes fixed on the young man who stood before it with a gore-tipped spear. The thing advanced slowly. It needed no run to get this puny opponent with its curved tusks. There was a sound of angry hornets, and a meaty thunking sound came at its conclusion. Shirt, with his leg streaming blood and a great bump showing redly on his head, had regained consciousness and attacked while the monster's attention was fixed on Gord. His broad-bladed axe brawl was buried in the creature's bristling shoulder. The barbarian gave a heave, his usually muscular arms straining to free the embedded weapon. Incredibly, the Rakshasa seemed to shrug the blow off. The axe came free, but Shirt lost the grip as the boar thing jerked toward him. Gord had no choice. If he did not distract the monster, it would tear his friend to pieces. The devil boar was intending to do just that. It spun on its splayed hooves and began its rush toward Shirt. The barbarian was scrambling madly to retrieve his fallen axe, and he would never be able to get clear before the thing had him. Gord lunged, striking just behind the creature's massive rib cage, hoping that the spear would sink into its lungs or heart. Despite this attack, the monster savaged Shirt terribly before it turned total with the one who had dealt it such a wound. That brings your death, It rumbled through its bloody mouth. It was bleeding from its wounds, but it seemed no slower or weaker than before. It began to stalk Guard slowly, as if playing cat and mouse with the young adventurer. Although his friend was unmoving, Guard doubted that the demon-boar had had time to finish the hardy barbarian with its terrible attack. Guard kept away from it, still taunting the thing and jabbing at its eyes with the spear. He knew he couldn't keep the game up much longer, however, for a single misstep and it would be upon him in a second. Guard wished he could somehow assume his leopard form, then he would show the blundering pig what a fight to the death was all about. It was impossible. He could certainly escape by vaulting into the trees, but that would allow the monster time to kill, even devour Shirt. Guard had to stand, man versus devil. Devil. Man versus devil. Devil. It nearly had him the next moment, as a fallen branch caught his foot for just a split second. The thing lunged, but as it did so another spear flew through the air and struck it on its wounded shoulder. The weapon bounced harmlessly off, but it saved Guard's life. Gallor had come back. Gallor, stay back! Guard shouted urgently to the bard. It is a devil pig, just as the villagers claim. The one-eyed man had removed his eye patch, Guard noted, and his long-bladed sword was in hand. I see it, Guard, the bard said loudly. It is a small and stinking little thing hiding within that greater blubbery body. Guard jabbed and struck home on the distracted creature, and it gave a bellowing squeal of pain at the attack. The spear had bitten deeply into the Rakshasa jaw, slicing the skin there in such a manner as to reveal its teeth where its flesh had been cut away. That was sufficient to make it completely ignore the newcomer and concentrate all of its savagery on Guard. It came at a trot, and there was nowhere for the young thief to go this time. Pray, he placed the butt of his weapon against the ground, pointing its tip at the monster's heart, bracing himself as he did so. Gellor did his best to devour the Rakshasa. He ran forward, sword extended for use as a spear, and yelling mightily as he came. This failed to make the monster waver. With a squealing that spewed bloody drops ahead of its charge, the devil-boar came forward in an instant. The sound it made as the rigid spear struck its chest and drove into its body was more terrible than any the bard had ever heard. Just as a true ball filled with killing lust would have done, this creature came forward, disregarding the spear that had mortally wounded it. Its charge carried it to where Guard stood, and the tusks and teeth tore through chest and throat in a welter of fontaining blood. The spear went through the monster's whole body, heart, innards, all. As it killed the man before it, the thing itself died. The horror of the scene froze Gallor for a second, and as he stood transfixed, the Rakshasa seemed to deflate. Black blood poured from mouth and wounds as its legs stiffened and kicked in death. The spear was protruding from its chest and rear, but of the man it had just killed so horribly there was no trace save a pool of red. End of chapter 31. And where is Guard now? Exactly? I really don't know. A devil-boar Rakshasa kill Guard after all. Okay, pretty casual, I think. Uh, okay, why not? A brief pause, then we continue. With chapter 32 is pretty short, I have to say. Not very long. Not very long chapter, after all. Now I came. Wait a second. Wait a second. Okay, good. Let's continue. The Brit of Dark, and now no more. Okay, good. Chapter 32. The demon it's a pretty hard name, I have to say it. The demon Kostichi, a most powerful of despised lord of the abyss, offered alliance to the both Grast and Yenogu, the demon lord of Njol. This triumvirate, together with a dozen lesser beings who had made common cause prior to this pact, now held sway over fully 66 layers of the place. Certain other powerful demons of great stature supported the alliance, sending their servants and soldiers to the tree. A gate was opened between Hoert and the world where giants ruled. Bands of mighty hill, mountain, and frost giants roamed from the howling hills southward. Before them they drove the regiment of hordes and hobgoblins who had sought to hold the land for the Hierarchs. These troops fled into the fell river or away into the open steppes, where the rovers of the barrens allowed them no mercy. Some took service with the kinglets of the bandit states to the east, for much of this territory had been freed of the grip of the Hierarchs but recently, and even troops such as these were acceptable to the newly returned rulers there. Many regiments managed to return southward to Molag Tog, where they thought would be safety. Most died there. The city was soon under siege. First, the wild kin of these humanoids made up the bulk of the attackers, but soon enough things far worse than Troll and Ogre, Bugbear and Njol were there. The masters of the Hierarchs summoned monstrous creatures from the lower plains to fortify the defense of Molag. Hideous Ordlings rubbed shoulders with even worse daemons of all sorts and the awful demodans of Tartarus. In answer to this, the besieging force was sent demons when they cried for aid. The retreat of Usus' forces became a sudden advance again, as hundreds upon hundreds of demons of all manner were loosed to combat the Hierarchs' reinforcements from Tartarus, Hades, and Gehenna. Not only were these forces outnumbered, but many Orderlings, secretly despising their master and favoring the chaos of the abyss, went over to Us. Men and humanoids, even those of power or fearsomeness, stayed low and did nothing as demons fought daimons, Hordlings or demodans, and were rent in two. Monstrous forms hopped and ran, crawled and wiggled, flapped and fluttered in a terrible dance of death and destruction around the city of Molag. Many demons died, but still more came daily, until the whole place was ringed with them, and the air above the city became unsafe for any who did not serve the abyss. Then the Dukes of Hell took an interest in what was happening. They sent legions of their servants to assist the masters of the Hierarchs, because their cause was one with Nerul and the rest. Cohorts of Abishai, blue, red, green, black, and white devils of winged sword, appeared in the sky to contest with the demons there. From spined devils to mighty pit fiends, the nine hells sent forth their companies. Those who had lesser power died, destroyed forever, whether demon, demoden, hordling, devil, or any other of the fullness being belched up from the vile lower plains. The terrible battle raged day and night for a week. When it finally ended, all of the things summoned were dead or returned to their own places. It had to be thus, or else the great rules would be drawn into the contest, and none, demon, devil, or otherwise, cared to risk this over some petty piece of the prime material plane at this particular conjunction of probability. The hells were satisfied that they had checked their abyssal foes. There was time enough to take from the demon spawn use that which he had stolen. Nerul seethed with fury at the setback, but Tartarus wavered, and if he continued to fight openly then, more likely than not, other of the lords of the abyss would unite to oppose the conjunction of evil. The river too decided to buy this time. Molag fell to the mundane armies of Uz. The Campion's realm now extended from the Dulce River in the west to the verge of the Filreeve forest and the banks of the right Ansa in the east. The Red of Uz extended northward to the cold marshes, and south to the Vang River and the border marshes of Furiondi and the Shieldlands. Bandit lordlings now pledged their fealty to Uz, while ambassadors from the nobles of the cold northwestern plains and the strange realm of Blackmoor came with gifts and offers of alliance. Even the master of the distant holdings, called Stonefist, considered such steps. So great was the fame which came to the Cambion upon his overthrow of the Hierarchs. Of the Hierarchs themselves, not even Hughes knew for certain. Those who had served this man had either died or taken service under their new master. Some few escaped, of course, for the Ten had surely managed to flee somewhere. Rumors said that they had been carried far to the south, but nothing was known beyond this tale. As the month of sunset brought the chill of winter to the land, the ones who opposed evil wondered what would follow. Perhaps the night and cold would be upon earth forever soon, and spirits dimmed and hearts grew heavy at this prospect. Others thought, understanding full well the contest between chaos and the rest of evil, were glad for the seeming victory of badness. These wise leaders sent messages of encouragement to the others who neared despair. When evil fights evil, God folk prosper. Do not lose heart, for use truly stands between us and the world of utter darkness. There is hope yet. It was not all well with use. The victories were hollow to the Cambion, for he had to share them with the two women who seemed determined to make his existence hell. No, worse than that. Ordered and regimented as it was, Hughes thought that such would almost be preferable to what he suffered. Ickwill held the second key and would not give it to him. With it in her possession, Hughes dare not argue strongly, let alone attempt force. Zakmoy meanwhile directed his every move with Ickville's advice and blessing. It was intolerable. Only he knew that somehow he must tolerate it all, biding his moment. The time when he actually gained the second key and stood above the two who ruled him as he had ruled others. Winter howled over Doraha, and Hughes wished that the reconstruction of his new palace at Molag were done so at least he could enjoy the benefits of that warmer clime. Thinking of the fair shores of the Pomarch, where snow never fell, Hughes wandered off to the dungeons below his beautiful palace in Doraha to see if a little amusement there might cheer him somewhat. End of chapter 32. So Hughes win against the Hierarchs, but it's not a complete win because of Zuktumoy and Ilwiv. Pretty bad. It's not very happy, we have to say it. Now, last chapter, only 7 pages, pretty short this one too. And then we have the epilogue, I think 1-2 pages, and then we end it. And then we have ended. Another BF prose. Left here return. I promise it. Okay, let's start another chapter, the last one this time. Chapter 33. Returning the former captives took several weeks. Moon and his friend and long-time fellow mercenary Patrick would not have it any other way. They saw most of the women and girls safely to their respective homes. Of course they were given rewards, the compensation being a few coppers or a gold orb, depending on the financial capability of the grateful relatives concerned. In the process, Patrick won the favor of a nice-looking lass from a small village in the Viscounty of Vermont. Nothing will do but that she be returned home last, of course, and most cheerfully agreed to the plan. Eventually the three brought their weary horses to the stable of the girl's home. Her father was a well-off swordsmith, and he took an instant liking to his prospective son-in-law Patrick, and Moon was most happily received as well. After they had spent several weeks with this man, nuptials were agreed to, and the date set. Nuptials, I think we say. Nuptials? Nuptials? I don't really know. Not much later, Patrick and the girl were married and settled in a cottage not far from the establishment of the swordsmith. Moon, being reluctant to leave the town, looked for gainful employment, for Patrick had already established a school for weapon use in the village. In due course, Moon joined the local militia, and he was soon appointed chief of the local watch and captain of the militia as well. For these services, he received ample compensation and was quite content. Eventually, he too found true love with a cousin of his friend Patrick's family, and was soon married and raising children. Far away in Arby, Deirdre returned. Although she had taken no part in the quest for the artifact of all evil, or an insignificant part at best, she was received as a heroine by the matriarch. Despotrix no longer being a fashionable tide, the ruler of that place styled herself thus. Deirdre was given the post of justiciar of the realm, and her brother Oscar was appointed as Dumer Crofter of all Arby. Neither found their offices or their lives totally satisfying, but then few mortals are given such satisfaction anyway. They were pleased enough and received much honor and accolades in their offices. A dark-skinned warrior took service with a caravan going east from the frontier of Furiondi to the Shieldlands. It was a long, slow trip. He left word at many villages and towns, and sought information too, but none knew of the ones he sought. In the process, though, he met many other men-at-arms, who earned their bread by offering their swords for hire. The best of these he recruited, some for position with the merchant's train of goods, others personally. He was now called Captain Ainconsi, and the company commanded was to be known as the Bronze Band. Ainconsi himself was the color of all bronze, and he chose for a device a bronze wood tree. Deep brown and green were the homely colors of the company's cloak and tabards. Although they had but small repute, Ainconsi and his new free company found employment in the Shieldlands, for the rebel lords to the north were active, and marauding parties were being sent down to array the lands around. The Bronze Band proved itself repeatedly against brigands and vicious humanoids alike. Soon its renown was such that the brown and green of its emblem were a byword throughout the whole of the territory. Great deeds were done by the company, and powerful fighting men and spell workers were proud to serve with it. Ainconsi was knighted by the Earl himself, and the flank captain sat in council with lords and generals. The half-elven ranger and druid Greenleaf, called Curly by his friends because of the anomaly of being bald-pated and having elvish blood, strived to enable the faction he served to gain the second portion of the artifact that would enable the unchaining of the greatest evil imaginable. Although the druids and the cabals above them were as neutral in their philosophy as Mordenkainen, they were, at least for the time, totally disinterested in the item itself. They desired most of all to retain the balance, not to gain the power of the artifact for their own hands. Despite the best efforts of them all, they failed. In the process, however, Greenleaf worked with dedication and a self-sacrificing that did not pass unnoticed. Upon returning to his master to relate what had transpired, the half-elf was made to rest and to spend many weeks in study and meditation. Thereafter, Greenleaf was elevated to a position of rare honor and great responsibility. He became one of only three who directly served the Grand Druid of the Flanaess. Greenleaf was now an Archdruid, and he roved the lands around as the Great Priest of Nature directed. They waited for 2 days, but no trace of their lost friend Gord could be found, and there was no sign of him. Gallor decided it was time they must leave. Shart was reluctant, but he also knew that the bard was correct. Duty demanded they be elsewhere, and terror in 2 days was near dereliction. When Touch and Shadow asked what had happened, neither of the men was able to explain. The devil in boar's form was dead. Of that there was no question. They skinned it while they waited, and saved its huge head for a trophy. What was left they burned, and even the ashes of that fire were buried thereafter. This the lads knew and understood. All that remained of Gord, however, was that enchanted spear with which he had slain the devil pig. Not even a trace of his blood was discernible after an hour. It was as if it had been absorbed by nature. That the black stain of the Rakshasa blood remained only added to the mystery. They all agreed that somehow things must not be as they appeared, because all traces of their young comrade could not disappear without some causative agent at work. Gellor did not mention to the others that the agent could be diabolical. I'll keep the spear, Gellor, and if God ever returns it will be ready for his use. Otherwise, it is a memento mori which the dogs of evil will wish to forget as they die. Shirt, I find that most fitting. The one-eyed bard told him. Where will you go with the spear? Back to the hills of my homeland and the fair trees of the Idri. And both of the lads will like it there, I'm sure. You'll have company then, my friends, the bard replied. I must ride all the way to the distant walls of Radika's city, and this seems a good hour to set forth and on that journey. The boys rode up upon Gord's horse, while the huge barbarian and the bard carried their trophies head and eye respectively with them. They reached Tasham soon enough, and the whole village turned out to receive them when word was known of who was with the two men and what they bore. In exchange for two swift little horses, tuck and provisions, they left a few coins and the monster's head in Tasham. The unusual aspect of the devil-boar was evident to all who saw it, so the gigantic head became the most famous trophy in the village. Soon folk flocked to Tasham to view the remains of the Rakshasa, and the establishment it hung in waxed prosperous indeed. Although neither of the boys had had a hand in slaying the devil boar, mere association with the man who broke in its carcass was sufficient renown. Tashan would gladly have received both Touch and Shadow as heroes, clasping them to themselves, at least for a time. Neither cared to stay despite all this, for even had Clydebo proved true and made them apprentice hunters as he vowed he would do, the lads wanted no part of it. They would see the world and remain reassured. They rode away amid the tears of kinfolk and cheers from the rest of the villagers. Although Gellor had used his heart to heal the terrible wounds his comrade had sustained in the fight with the Rakshasa, the bard insisted that the hide belonged to Shirt for his part in the combat. A petted humorcraft in Tasham had placed spells upon the huge skin so that it would not rot before they found a place to have it dried and cured. In the course of their long journey, they had it preserved properly. Then Shirt decided that the hide must be put to some proper use. Nothing will do but for it to be worked into articles they will wear in battle. Gellor demurred, but eventually the bard accepted a broad belt made from a strip of the thing's hide. Shirt wore a queer jack of the stuff and thick braces thereafter. The sleeveless cuirass was incredible toque and could never wear out, it seemed, while it had a strange property of lessening blows. Both Touch and Shed were given leather caps to wear, and the remainder of the devil boar's huge hide covered the shields they eventually bore. The four made their long ride eastward, with few incidents along their route. When they finally crossed the rolling waters of the Arton Samay, Gellor bid them farewell and headed south for the Palatine county of Ernst. Shirt and his two young chargers watched the bard until he was out of sight, and then they continued on eastward. Their destination was many, many leagues distant, but they viewed the journey still to come as a marvelous experience. The quest for the second key of the artifact of all evil was ended. End of chapter 13. And now, the last chapter, the epilogue. 5 pages. Okay, good. And we have ended Artifact of Evil. Are you ready for the last chapter? Are you ready for the epilogue? Okay, epilogue. It's a pretty word. I have to say it. That. Let's start it. Good. I think we discover where God is. A vaulted ceiling with beams of natural logs supporting it came gradually into focus. It was softly lit by sunlight streaming in somewhere, but there was no strength to allow an attempt to discover the source. A warm breeze played over his body, and this felt wonderful. It made him aware of the softness of the stuff upon which he lay. God gathered his strength and slowly blinked his eyes. Their focus was sharper now. Who am I? He wondered. There was no answer in his mind, so he gave up and allowed himself to drift again into the comforting drowse that washed over brain and body as a soft little wave gently covers the sandy shore. Time passed. How long a time he had no idea, but with its passage came a new awakening. This brought new alertness. His eyes could move. He felt every part of his body, and he knew his name. Suddenly a beautiful face framed by a mane of tawny hair appeared above him. The eyes smiled, and the red lips spoke. Only 7 remains to you now, so use them wisely, the voice said, and the pair of lovely lips kissed his forehead softly. I, yes, God. Where? He started to ask weakly, but the beautiful female answered before he could finish. Safe and becoming, sound at the demands of the cat lord, of course. Where else could you be after using one of the special lives he granted for you? The devil-boar! It killed me! I remember now. The fear and the awful pain as... Again Theorip silenced him, this time with her long cool fingers placed gently on his mouth. Hush, God. Don't think of that now. Later, when you are stronger, there will be time. I'm anxious to hear all about it, too, she said with real enthusiasm. Cat Lord knows a little, but he wishes to hear the whole tale as soon as you are able to tell it. When do you when do you think that will be? God asked her. Now that you have awakened from the comatose sleep of your regeneration, I think you'll be up and around in a few days, even if you'll be weak as a newborn cub. Yes, I think you are right. I feel ravenous, Theorip, and and very thirsty too. Help me to sit up and see if there isn't something for me to eat around here. Just like a male, Theorip said with mock exasperation, always expecting the female to serve them one thing or another. She gently helped Gord sit up, placing fluffy pillows of down behind him, and straightening the soft sheet that covered his scarred body. Don't worry, those will fade into nothing more than little lines in a day or two, Theorip said when she noticed him looking at the places where the Rakshasa had torn open his belly and chest. Food! Gor cried with feigned supplication, and some fresh milk to help your body regain its natural strength, Theorip said firmly. You must eat and rest, and? Gord repeated, wondering what else he could possibly do. Tyr looked at him with a gaze that reminded God of a cat eyeing a mouse. And then show me how you can turn into a huge panther. Handsome, she said. Then she was gone in a whirl. God lay back and talked about that for a long time. End of Artifact of Evil. We finished the book. The second book of Griok Adventures and the second book of Gordorog. Then next time we begin the third book of Gordorog. I decided to end the Gordorog series first because it's a saga. It's a saga. So it's a single story across different books, and I want to complete it before we can turn back to the older Griok Adventures of Rose Estates. They are pretty lame, as I I have read that they are pretty lame, but I don't really know. We discover it together. Then for now, we think we are good. How long is Sea of Death? Sea of Death is the next one. I want to spoil me. Ah, not so much. Only 329 pages. Not so much. Well, we spoke of it next time, sure. For now, we end here. We have covered all of our book. And so, Artifact of Evil ends. And, good people, thank you for following me. I hope you a good night. And from the Stoned Storyteller, this is all. Good night.